The new trailer for The Bad Batch introduced us to a new character called Omega. We don't know much at all about them except that she's a fan of Clone Force 99, whom she meets on Kamino. I have my own theory for her identity and how she might be important to the story, but I've seen a handful of other ideas thrown around. So today I'm just going to run through some of the most common theories and offer my thoughts. First, the big one I've seen people latching onto is that she is a Palpatine clone of some kind. I think anyone who follows this channel knows I'm instantly against the idea. I don't think it's absurd. Heck, in a way, it makes a lot of sense. I just don't like clone Palpatine. Didn't like it in Dark Empire, didn't like it in The Rise of Skywalker. But clone Palpatine exists in Star Wars, so it is possible we're seeing some experimentation in that vein. And, as I'm writing this out, I'm coming around on the idea. Because Star Wars animation does a really good job at telling interesting stories while also recontextualizing the movies in surprising and often satisfying ways. The Clone Wars absolutely makes the prequels better in my opinion. Despite taking place so close to the prequel trilogy, The Bad Batch could very well help make some sense of The Rise of Skywalker and give us an actual idea about Palpatine's return instead of just somehow. I still think it's unlikely. We've already seen The Mandalorian might be dabbling in the same kind of story, but more than that, most of the content surrounding Clone Palpatine is from the Rise of Skywalker novelization. So especially when I see people asking, could Omega be connected to Palpatine's clone son? I'd guess almost certainly not. If you're watching this channel, I think chances are you know about all that, but most people that watch this series are probably going to have no clue, and I don't think there's really any sense in bringing in such a convoluted storyline. On top of that, knowing the timeline on animation and just how long it takes to produce a series like this, I have a feeling they weren't writing the scripts with The Rise of Skywalker in mind. It's no secret the behind the scenes for Episode 9 was a mess. Colin Trevorrow was removed from the project in 2017, about 3.5 years ago, and by many accounts the final story was being adjusted during filming. With all that in mind, I just don't see how The Bad Batch would be able to turn around in less than 2 years to build a show around a plot point established in the film's novelization. So I'll just say that Omega being a Palpatine clone is possible, and I could even see it working despite my reservations, but I still think it's highly unlikely. I've seen some people throw out the idea that Omega is the child of a clone. That's interesting, but I think the biggest argument against this would be her age. Even if she inherited the advanced aging clones have, she could only be 6 years old at the max, and she looks older than that to me. But how about a Force-sensitive clone? Now we're getting into more possible territory in my opinion. It makes complete sense that Palpatine would want to figure out how to imbue someone with the Force through scientific means. We know he's tried multiple times to put together a Force-sensitive army by kidnapping Force-sensitive children. It sure would be a lot easier if you could just make a Force-sensitive army. The name Omega could be a sign that she was like Palpatine's endgame with the clones. The only reason I'm doubtful of this is because, again, it sounds like similar ground to The Mandalorian. The Bad Batch picks up this kid and then later they learn she's Force sensitive and they have to protect her. I think I'd be willing to forgive that though. The stakes of protecting a Force sensitive child in an immediately post-Order 66 galaxy are pretty high, and I think they could do a lot of different stuff with the story. But in the end, I do think the setup is going to be much simpler. I think Omega is just a female clone of Jango Fett. I think that she is simply going to be a, quote, mutation, like the Bad Batch. That would make sense as to why she is so enamored to meet them. She's different from everyone around her, a group of people that are all literally the same. She probably feels like an outsider, but she looks up to this group of clones that are also different. She sees that their differences are strengths instead of weaknesses, and of course she might wind up idolizing them. Physically, I think she resembles the younger clones we've seen in the Clone Wars. She has that same kind of accent Boba and Jango have. The blonde hair is throwing me a bit, and I have to admit it reminds me of Palpatine's hair in The Phantom Menace. Her headpiece had me guessing for a while as well, but it's just something we've seen Nala Se wear before in Season 6 of the Clone Wars. I'm seeing that as more of a connection to Kamino, but it could also be a connection to Palpatine again, because Nala Se was definitely in on the whole inhibitor chip conspiracy. But thematically, I think it makes the most sense for her to just be a different Jango clone. Maybe the last one, as her name could imply. Maybe the Kaminoans realized that they had exhausted the original DNA, something they mentioned in the Clone Wars, and she was the last one. I love the idea of her bonding with the Bad Batch and learning to see her own uniqueness as a strength, but I've also been hoping to see what life is like for the clones as a whole after the Clone Wars, after their purpose has been served. Where do they go? What do they do? How and where do you find a new purpose? We know they're going to be mercenaries and they'll probably take some good jobs and some shady jobs, but if you've got a young one on your crew, a member of the next generation, you immediately start wanting to be a good role model, and you're forced to answer some tough questions about the kind of person you want to be, the kind of legacy you want to leave. I'm sure Omega will have her own journey, but will also serve to encourage the Bad Batch to grow as well. We don't know enough to say anything definitively yet. I'm not overly confident in my own guesses. I'm wrong all the time. But I like to be a little more reserved in my theories, so if or when big twists happen, I can be more surprised. Let me know who you think Omega is in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all our Star Wars coverage, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.